This is the second lecture for Module 9 of JAM 456 and COM 456, Nonprofit Fundraising, and this time we're talking about media training basics. So, what happens if you get a phone call from a journalist asking for an interview? How do you respond? Well, the most important thing to do right at the beginning is to find out who you're talking to. What is the reporter's name? What is their publication? And when is their deadline? After you get that information, it is not inappropriate to ask if you can call back in just a few minutes when you've had a chance to clear your desk, clear your schedule, and collect any information you might need. Once you've done that, return the call, and that should not include a significant time lag, because if the journalist doesn't hear back from you fairly quickly, they'll be likely to call on someone else. While you're collecting your information, you should identify the 3 main points that you would like to see included in any story that might be written about your organization, and you should present those 3 main points. In the presentation of your main points, you should stay right on message. Don't allow the journalist to ask questions that get you off track. And don't linger on the phone. Say what you came to say and then be done. One last thought. You should never say anything that begins with the phrase, "I probably shouldn't be telling you this, but..." Certainly, that's a clue that perhaps the material would be best left unsaid. Now, it's important to remember that a mass media interview is not your ordinary conversation. To give a successful media interview, one must know the rules, respect the time limits, and always expect the unexpected. Your goal should be to communicate your message in a way that moves the conversation in a direction that you desire. And there are a variety of different types of media interviews that you might be asked to give. For television, you might be asked to speak for a news broadcast, or public affairs programming, or a feature story in a talk show. For radio, you may be asked to engage in a live interview or a taped interview that might be edited after the taping is finished. You may be asked to speak in a talk radio segment. For print, of course, we have newspapers, but newspapers come in 2 flavors. There's the daily and the weekly. And you may be interviewed by a reporter or asked to contribute to an opinion editorial. And finally, there are magazines which might ask you to participate in an interview for a news story or a feature story. So, what kind of messaging strategies should you use when you are engaged in the interview process? Well, regardless of what kind of media you're dealing with, you should try to tailor the key messages that you choose to the characteristics of the media outlet's primary audience. And this can be tricky sometimes. For example, talk radio often focuses on negativity to attract audiences. So in that case, your goal should be to express your positive point of view using very positive language, and that can be difficult to do. Still, keeping in mind that you're speaking to a particular audience will help you to address that audience's interests. Second, keep your messages interesting by balancing the facts and figures and data that you might use with examples or short human interest stories that provide personal or emotional appeal that audiences find interesting. Next, if at all possible, try to use compelling images to help audience members visualize what you're talking about. And finally, use uncomplicated but interesting language to describe what it is that you do and who you serve. Speak in sound bites that can easily be spliced into a broadcast story. Now, if you've been invited to a broadcast studio, or even if you've simply been invited to have a cup of coffee with a blogger, there are some things that you can do before the interview that will really help you to be prepared. For example, there are a number of questions that you can ask. What is the topic, and who is the reporter? Why does this reporter want to talk to me anyway? Why did they choose my organization? Who else might the reporter be talking to for this particular story? And what questions does the reporter plan to ask me? Now, reporters don't always want to tell you their questions in advance, but in some cases, they find that it's even easier if they give you an idea of what you'll be talking about so that you can be prepared. So don't be hesitant to ask, what kind of questions do you plan to ask? It can help you to find out what type of media outlet you'll be addressing and whether that interview will be broadcast live or recorded, whether it will be edited, or whether the recording will be played as is. And of course you'll need to know when and where the interview itself will take place. But it would also be helpful to know when the story will air or be published. And you should also try to get an idea of how much time to set aside for the interview so that you can be sure you're not feeling rushed as you try to answer the journalist's questions. Now, once you've learned as much as you can about the interview conditions, you should then turn your attention to the messages that you want to be delivering to the audience you will be addressing. And remember, your audience will be the readers, the listeners, or the viewers, not the interviewer who is sitting across the table from you. As you think about these key messages, consider how you might weave these messages into the conversation you're having with the interviewer while still responding adequately to the reporter's questions. On the day the interview takes place, you should start by selecting your wardrobe carefully. Avoid stripes, low-cut blouses for women, and loud ties for men. These can be very distracting, especially in a broadcast setting. Business or business casual attire is appropriate, except for an on-site interview. For example, if you were working in a disaster zone, you'd look a little bit silly in a business suit. So always think about what would be appropriate for the setting itself. Second, make sure to arrive early for the interview, because sometimes there can be a change in plans, a change in timing, a change in satellite availability, and so you want to be there and be prepared to go on ahead of time. And if nothing happens and you have to do the interview right on time, that's fine too. You can make good use of your time checking newspaper headlines so that you're aware of breaking news and recent developments. While you're waiting, you can also review your key messages and keep thinking about ways to incorporate those messages into the interview itself. During the interview, you should give the interviewer your undivided attention. That means that you should turn off your cell phone and physically turn yourself away from distractions. Stay as calm and composed as you can. Remember, you're the expert. They've asked you to come in and speak to them because you have information that they don't. And while some journalists do try to ambush or browbeat their sources, most simply want to get the story and then move on. So you don't really have to worry too much about trick questions in most settings. Now, if you're asked a question and you don't know the answer to that question, you should always say so. A good way to respond is to say, I'm not really sure about that, but I can find out and get back to you. And then, of course, make sure that you do follow up as soon as possible with a good answer. During the interview, you should never offer your personal opinions. Remember, you are representing the nonprofit organization that you're affiliated with. You should also avoid responding to hypothetical scenarios. Stick to factual information in the here and now. Keep your responses short, clear, and interesting. Think sound bites, sound bites, sound bites. And remember those key messages. Try as much as possible to use positive language and never ever talk down to your audience. Remember, you are the expert, but audience members do want to be treated like competent adults. Likewise, you should be gracious to the interviewer. Reporters represent the audience's interests, and they're working to give the audience the information they need. So if you treat the reporter in a less than respectful fashion, audience members are going to think that that reflects your attitude toward them. And remember those key messages. For broadcast interviews, it's also very, very important to pay attention to your posture and your gesturing. When you're sitting, you should have your legs crossed at the knee or with your ankles crossed under the chair. When you're standing, try to put one foot slightly in front of the other and keep your weight on the back foot. And with your hands, for TV, you need to keep your hands in what they call the box, which means below your chin, between your shoulders, but above your lower chest, so that your hands aren't flopping in and out of the frame. And in general, try to avoid excessive gesturing. And remember your key messages. Here are some more tips for broadcast interviews. Remember, facial expressions really matter on television. A pleasant, natural smile will make you appear more approachable, engaging, and sincere. But avoid a big toothy grin because that can appear forced. And of course, never smile if you're addressing a topic associated with a natural disaster, death, or other crisis. Where do you look when you're having an interview? Well, look right at the reporter as if you're having a normal conversation with them. If you're doing a satellite feed and there isn't actually a reporter to look at, then it's appropriate to look directly at the camera. In either case, offer whoever you're looking at plenty of eye contact because that eye contact tells the viewer that you're sincere, while looking around or looking away reads as a possible indicator of dishonesty. Now, once the interview is over, you should be very, very cautious. Even after the formal interview period is open, your comments remain fair game for a journalist. So you should never make an offhanded comment, offer a personal opinion, or validate any position that is contrary to your key message points. After that interview, you should also spend some time assessing what you think worked during the interview and what didn't. It's appropriate to send a thank you note to the reporter expressing your appreciation for the interview opportunity and offering one or two ideas for future stories. If you made a mistake during the interview, let the reporter know right away. And if the reporter made a mistake, then it's appropriate for you to let them know, correcting and commenting on errors, but do so in a positive manner to maintain that good relationship. Finally, whatever you do, avoid the 7 deadly sins in mass media interviews. Number 1, never make an off-the-record comment. Just simply saying that something is off the record does not make it so. Second, never say no comment when you're questioned because this makes you look like you have something to hide. Number 3, never make off-the-cuff remarks. Using humor, sarcasm, and other offhanded remarks may be offensive to some audience members, especially if you're addressing an important, significant topic. Number 4, never delay responding to a reporter. Even a slight delay may mean the journalist will go elsewhere and you'll lose an important opportunity to engage the public with your important messages. Number 5, never, ever, ever tell a lie. There's always somebody who will be willing to tell the truth, and your credibility is your most important asset. Number 6, don't withhold bad information. When leaders fail to disclose important information, the failure often becomes a media story in and of itself. Such media stories are almost always negative and can be very damaging to individuals and organizations. And finally, never pick a fight with a journalist. Politicians often say you should never quarrel with a man who buys his ink by the barrel and his paper by the ton. It's simply not worth it. A good relationship is worth its weight in gold.